Dragon Age the Veilguard was one of the biggest failures of 2024. It was such a massive disappointment for people who were really excited for the decade-long wait to be over and getting another DA game, but unfortunately it failed to live up to people's expectations, and so it sold really poorly. But now we're finding out that Veilguard was in the bottom half of Steam's top seller chart in 2024, and it got beat out by Hogwarts Legacy, Elder Scrolls Online, Final Fantasy 16, and more. I have a few different things to show off, but before I get into the topic, if you enjoy the content I create, check out the links in the description, join the community in my live streams, and consider supporting through Patreon or YouTube memberships. Now, I think it's hilarious to see EA and BioWare get wrecked because of this game. We waited 10 years for this title to finally release, and instead of just giving Dragon Age fans what they've wanted, which was a true Inquisition sequel, they decided, no, we're going to try to do like a soft reboot of the franchise. We're going to dumb down a lot of the fantasy elements. We're going to change character designs, and we're going to shove a bunch of modern day BS into this game. Modern day terminology like transgender, non-binary, top surgery, scar toggles, having you choose your pronouns. Instead, they could have just focused on it being a dragon fantasy game and made a boatload of money, but we've heard that that is not the case, and, well, according to Steam's top sellers chart, it was not even close to being number one. So it says Steam released their best of 2024 charts, and it reveals that Hogwarts Legacy, among 50 other titles, sold better than Dragon Age the Veilguard. Now, there are a lot of really great games on this list, do not get me wrong. While 2024 had a lot of failures like Kill the Justice League, Flintlock, The Siege of Dawn, Concord, Dustborn, Veilguard, there were some really stellar titles like Pal World, like Shadow of the Erdtree, like Space Marine 2, like Wukong that came out, and it's really not a shocker that Veilguard failed to live up to EA's expectations because BioWare is a shell of the company they once were, and they're filled to the brim with activists, and that's so sad to have to say. And sometimes activists can still create amazing content, but it was very clear that these people could not leave their personal politics at the door when going to work, or they were hired because they were not capable of doing that, and that's why this ended up being such a massive disaster. So Veilguard was placed in Steam's bronze bucket, meaning that at the very least 50 other games sold better than it, including Pal World, which was really fun, Destiny 2. I don't play Destiny 2, but I know people really love it. Elden Ring, of course, easy to see why. Helldivers 2, Black Myth Wukong, Black Ops 6, Baldur's Gate 3, Dota 2, Space Marine 2, Apex Legends, Counter-Strike 2, PUBG Battlegrounds, which were in the Platinum bucket. Now, some of these are free to play, which is important to point out, like Dota 2 and Apex Legends, so it just means that they ultimately got more downloads, so they still did better, and we of course, could technically get into, microtransactions and the billions of dollars I'm sure these games brought in. But when it just comes to sheer player counts, I mean, Veilguard got wrecked. Other games that had higher grosses than Veilguard include Warframe, The First Descendant, Cyberpunk 2077, Path of Exile, Dragon Ball, Sparking Zero, Throne and Liberty, which were all in the gold bucket. And the silver bucket included Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, one of the better games to release this year, actually, Dragon's Dogma 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Final Fantasy 16, Elder Scrolls Online, Grand Theft Auto 5, and others. So given the randomization of the rankings within these buckets, it's quite possible that Monster Hunter Wilds, which does not even release until the end of February, had more revenue than Veilguard, given it's in the same bronze bucket, which is hilarious. A game that's not even out is technically, well, we do not know for sure, but is technically at least the equal of Veilguard and is probably even doing better now when people are still only pre-ordering it. We're still, 2 months away from release, but once release happens, it's going to skyrocket up and ultimately overshadow a title like Veilguard. It is just clear as day that this is not a game that people really loved. It was, a title that failed to live up to people's expectations, and everything with this game was just truly terrible, except for the combat. I thought the combat was pretty good, but one good element cannot make up for the other 50 bad elements. So I need to give it a little bit of credit, but even though it had good combat, there's still games that have similar combat that still did it better, like Hogwarts Legacy. So Steam's charts come in the wake of the game's industry head Christopher Dring revealing how poorly Veilguard sold in Europe during an episode of the Microcast. He said Veilguard, which came out at the end of October, that was number 19 in the best-selling new games chart, but was number 68 overall. Terrible. It was Christmas, and in terms of AAA blockbusters, the traditional big blockbuster Christmas games, you had Call of Duty, which did well, you had Dragon Age, which did not, so that is disappointing in that position. Dragon Age had the market to itself, and it couldn't find an audience, and that's really scary as we move into the following year. So we basically know that 2025 is going to be a very rough year for these woke games, and I'm sure that some of them are still going to sell well, like Assassin's Creed Shadows, for example. I think it's still going to sell relatively well because of brand recognition and because there are so many people who see Assassin's Creed and instantly swipe their credit cards, similar to Call of Duty. But there are other titles like Avowed that I don't think are going to do amazing, right? It's going to be on Game Pass day one, so I'm sure it's going to get quite a few downloads, but I don't think it's going to be able to overthrow something like Black Ops 6 as the biggest Game Pass launch of all time, or something like Starfield. So, of course, Dring also detailed that games such as Black Myth Wukong and Palworld were not on the European charts. He cited because their digital sales data had not been provided, so it's highly likely that Veilguard is even lower down the real list. And this is what happens when you have a bunch of activists who are a part of your project that do not care about the gaming industry, do not care about respecting this franchise, and want to push their own politics into their work. Look at Corinne Bush, for example. They decided to evade questions about the game's sales data. She was asked, how has the commercial response to the game been? I've seen stories about sales that have been mixed or inconclusive. The game seems to be doing okay, but struggling to keep pace with Inquisition before it. Has it been a success from your point of view, and how do you measure that? And Bush responded with, there's 3 axes we can measure this by: what the team was able to do and put together, the pride that they can take in that. Every game that is made, especially in the AAA space where you're talking hundreds of developers, timelines, is a miracle. That they executed at quality internally, we consider that a success. And then she goes on to boast about how they're quite proud of the critical reception. Who gives a fuck what the critics say? You should care about what your customers have to say. You should care that gamers did not praise this game. They didn't even like it, never mind praise it. So you would think that they would admit, oh yeah, it didn't resonate with everyone, which is totally fine. We were happy to be able to at least put it out, at least something like that. But no, it's, oh, we're quite proud of the critical reception. Critics don't buy your games. Critics don't even play your games half the time. And clearly the critics were not able to bring in the modern audience, aka sensitive snowflakes, on social media, to this title, given its all-time peak was 89,000, which is still a decent number, don't get me wrong, but it's not what you would expect from a franchise the size of Dragon Age and, being EA and BioWare. But in-game right now is 10,523, and it's just not looking particularly good for Dragon Age the Veilguard at this point. So I don't think, to be honest, we're going to hear much more about this game, given it released, it came, it went. We're all still pointing and laughing at characters like Tosh, but it's very quickly died out. So I will be keeping my eye on Veilguard, but I think it's kind of at its end. And, well, now that we're going to see a rush of new video games coming out at the beginning of 2025, everything seems to be crumbling around EA and BioWare and this title. But that's all that I really had to discuss in this video. Let everyone know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, and if you didn't, give it a dislike. I appreciate your support either way, but I'll talk to you all again in the next video really soon.